Marathon UN climate talks in Madrid are coming to an end with agreement on some key points, but the most contentious issue still unresolved. After more than 2 weeks, negotiators have failed to deliver a firm agreement on how to handle carbon markets where big emitters can buy the right to pollute from countries that emit less than their fair share. Delegates from nearly 200 countries passed declarations calling for ambitious climate protection targets, but a decision on rules for regulating carbon emissions is now postponed to next year. And let's listen to what the president of COP25, Carolina Schmidt, had to say in her closing remarks.
Of course, it is sad that we didn't reach a final agreement. We were this close. I appreciate all the effort and the long hours that we've invested trying to achieve it. We were so close. But as many of you know, today we have taken concrete steps forward with concrete resolutions that fill us with hope. Hope that we are now closer to establishing carbon market rules, a base with ecological integrity that considers the needs of everyone, the implementation we so desperately need, and one that respects the different requirements of the countries. We have to move ahead faster and better.
DW's Louise Osborne has been covering the conference for us in Madrid, and she joins us for more. Hi, Louise. Can you explain to us what exactly has been decided and what has not?
So what they basically decided was that they wanted to enhance the ambition to reduce carbon dioxide emissions in countries all over the world. This was something that NGOs and civil society were quite happy about. They wanted to see countries take that into account. At the moment, emissions would rise too high, even with the targets that countries have set. So that was one thing. The carbon markets then, of course, as we've just heard, did not work out. They were here for 2 weeks trying to come to an agreement, and they just weren't able to do that. So it's being pushed to next year.
Louise, why couldn't they find agreement on that point?
There were some contentious issues around, for example, double counting. So the idea that a country that was buying carbon credits so that they could emit more would be able to count those reductions within their own reductions, but then also the country that was selling those emissions might also be able to count them. So they were trying to come up with stringent regulation to make sure that these carbon markets would actually have an impact and help with regards to lowering greenhouse gas emissions. That's something that they just couldn't agree on. And there were also countries like Brazil, for example, who have old credits under the old system, who are hoping to keep those in play, and a lot of countries who are against that.
Louise, looking at what has come out of this summit on a whole, what are the reactions that you've been seeing there? Are activists pleased with what's been agreed?
I mean, I think activists are less upset than they were yesterday. Yesterday, they were calling the COP an outright failure because there was a document coming through, a text where countries were saying that they would just accept the targets that had already been set rather than trying to increase ambitions. That was then changed today. NGOs said that that is definitely a positive step. They're also positive about the fact that carbon markets have been moved on because they don't want to see carbon markets in the Paris Agreement at all, many of them. So they're positive in that way, but they're still very disappointed. They see this as a watered down deal, and they want to see concrete action taken, and it's just not being done yet.
Louise, we saw delegates negotiating for more than 2 weeks, going into overtime. They couldn't reach agreement, as you said, on the question of carbon markets. It begs the question, are these types of summits really the way to drive a global action on climate change?
Well, I think the thing that we have to remember is that these climate conferences bring together almost 200 nations, which is something that they just wouldn't do normally. It also brings the issue of climate change to the forefront of, public view. We can all see that it's happening, and that is definitely important. Some people say, though, that perhaps it needs to be changed slightly because obviously the negotiations that were taking place were running into the night. Delegates were probably not at their best when talking about these issues, and maybe that needs to be done more kind of on the sidelines in bilateral agreements rather than, just at these big conferences.
DW's Louise Osborne reporting from the UN climate talks there in Madrid. Thank you so much.